Welcome to Breaking Beliefs. My name is Amy Vetter, and this is where we explore the thoughts that shape our lives and our work. Each episode uncovers how challenging our limiting beliefs creates space for authentic growth and sustainable success. Let's break some beliefs together. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Emma-Louise Parkes. She's a former air traffic controller turned coach. Emma-Louise knows what it's like to regulate emotions and bounce back in an immensely stressful position. She self-identifies as an introvert while simultaneously breaking the mold of what an introvert looks like. Bringing energy and empathy, focused questions, and unwavering belief in the power of quiet, Emma-Louise has worked with over 500 plus clients and touched the lives of over 100,000 people through her podcast. In her world of introversion is not a mark of shyness or fear. It is a clue into how someone recharges their energy. And by showing ambitious introverts how to manage theirs, she's able to consistently and drastically transform how much they're able to achieve in their business or careers. During our interview, we talk about her career in aviation, including her transition from being a flight attendant to an air traffic controller, and eventually into entrepreneurship through her own coaching business. We explored topics such as the challenges of transitioning between careers, the importance of feedback and training and professional development, and strategies for introverts in the workplace and building confidence through consistent action. I hope that you enjoy this podcast, and if you do, please share it with a friend. We always appreciate the fact that you subscribe to this podcast and listen to it and support the work that we're doing at the B3 Method Institute. Enjoy. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm excited today to have Emma-Louise Parkes on. So Emma, would you like to just give a brief background of yourself before we get into your story?
Sure. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. So my brief background, if I can condense it, is I spent 23 years in aviation, and 17 of those I was an air traffic controller in the London terminal control area, which is essentially some of the busiest and most complex airspace in the world. Yeah, that was me for 17 years, as well as training new controllers, which led me to become super interested in psychology and confidence and training and coaching, which then led me to start my own coaching business. And here I am 6 years later as the founder and CEO of the Ambitious Introvert, which is now coaching and performance consultancy for founders and executives.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to get into that story. So why don't you just start us off with where you grew up, what your parents did for a living, what's your background?
So I grew up about as centrally in England as you can get. So near Birmingham, as far from the sea as you can get. So the sea always seemed very exotic to me as a kid, even though England's not very big, granted. It's not like being in like the middle of the States. But I grew up on the outskirts of Birmingham, which is the second biggest city. I would say we were a working class family. My dad worked in a factory, in a forge. My mum worked smaller jobs, like she worked in a pet shop and she worked checkout at the supermarket, and there were three of us, so everything was always very, very busy. And what was interesting is I went to a really bad school, and I could see it now looking back. It closed down. They couldn't get teachers to teach there anymore, and we owned our own house. Bad behavior. It was in a bad area. It was surrounded by a number of council estates, which I guess is what you would call like projects or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it was there were a lot of drugs, there was a lot of teenage pregnancy, there was a lot of truancy, there was a lot of violence. And we have like a grading system here in the UK. And if schools get good grades, more people want to go there, teachers want to teach there. And this school got like the lowest grade in the area, and eventually it closed down. So I think I had a really interesting background because, we were stable financially. We weren't well off, but the areas surrounding us were quite run down.
Yeah. So how did that affect you personally growing up like that. So how did you navigate a school like that and making friends and everything?
I remember my primary school was much more sheltered and much more, people from the area that I lived. And I remember we go to secondary school at 11 in
Mm,
the UK. And I remember like my first day of secondary school, which has kids from 11 up to 18. So it's a huge age range.
yeah.
And I remember just people were just smoking cigarettes at break time and starting fire. And I just remember this absolute shell shock
Mhm.
of, like 2 months ago before we broke up for summer holidays, like people were playing hopscotch and like
Yeah.
bringing Barbies into school. And now suddenly it's like, oh, that person's just sniffing glue in the toilets. And I guess when I look back, that jump of
Mhm.
needing to mature so quickly at that age to really kind of be streetwise and understand how not to get in trouble.
So, were you seeing, because that's a big age gap,
Mm.
11 to 18. So, was it the 11-year-olds doing that, or was it the older kids and then you're kind of mixed in with them, or
It was, I would say it was the year above us and onwards.
Mhm.
So, still
So
very,
then
very, very young.
people
'Kay, yeah,
moving toward that in their first year.
yeah, yeah. And I think there's that shell shock in the first year, but then you did mix, there was one kind of communal playground for everyone, playground, like break areas and stuff for everyone. So, and people had like older brothers and sisters. So they would be chatting to, and you did kind of mix. You didn't mix in classrooms, but there was definite, mix in at social times.
So, did you get pressure to do things that weren't in alignment with who you were?
That's really interesting because I never felt like I did, but
Mhm.
I was also always pretty confident in just going, nah, that's not for me. That's not to say other people wouldn't have felt pressured, of course, because at that age specifically, you know what peer pressure is like. I mean, luckily we didn't have social media or anything then, but it was still an environment where certain things were seen as cool. But
Right.
I think I had, even back then, I'm very emotionally sensitive. And I think I was attuned to, oh, like someone smoking a cigarette might look cool, but oh, this guy that's on a lot of drugs just kind of looks ill. And
Yeah.
there's a kind of level of difference here.
Yeah. So, when you say you're emotionally sensitive, where do you think that came from? Like, how were you able? Because an 11-year-old brain, that's a lot. Did your parents talk to you about this, or with your siblings? Like, where do you think you learned to be confident enough to not go with the group or the
I
peer
think
pressure?
I think the thing I put it down to, definitely not my siblings, because they're both significantly older than me. So they were 12 and 14 when I was born.
Okay.
So, for all
Oh.
intents and purposes, a lot of my childhood, I felt like an only child because,
Mhm.
they were teenagers then and going off and doing their thing. I think where I got the confidence, and this is a great question because I've never made this connection,
Mhm.
is that I performed from a young age. I did dance lessons from when I was 3 or 4 years old, right the way through till I was 16. And I think that gave me the confidence to, not confidence as in like, ta-da, look at me, but
Mhm.
it gave me something outside of the norms of school or family that I would go to. And I knew that I had to act a certain way and I had to be a certain way, but that also if I didn't feel comfortable doing something, like if I didn't feel comfortable doing a move because my body wasn't, ready to do that move, to say, oh no, like I can't do the splits or I can't do this. So I think the speaking up piece probably came through dance, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting how those things we do, like as far as performance, gets you ready for other things in your life,
Yeah. Yeah,
and the
totally.
practicing. And so, was dance like something you were trying to achieve at? Like, where if you did something bad, it might get in the way of you being able to achieve your next goal with it? Or did you have other things set in your mind that you didn't want it to get in the way of?
I've always been really ambitious, but I haven't always known where I'm going.
Mhm.
So no, it wasn't. Dance was never something I saw as this could be a career or anything like that, as much as I loved it. And I think that's probably a limiting belief because of where I was from. I didn't see people going to be dancers from where I grew up. So that's a whole other podcast episode. But but I think I had an understanding of things have consequences and things have repercussions. And although I never had a dream job when I was in like high school, I never thought, I really want to go to college and do this thing. I knew I wanted to get good grades. I knew I wanted options. And I never wanted to cut my options off just because I was trying to hang out with cool kids.
Yeah. And what did you learn from the way you saw your parents work?
So interesting. I think because my dad worked very hard, he came home like full of dirt and grease and oil and would, have to go shower straight away. And it was that kind of very manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
And then seeing my mum, she would work, like I say, multiple jobs. And so he was trying to be around my schooling. Sometimes it was evenings and weekends, but generally she was like trying to work when I was at school and stuff. I think the biggest thing that came to mind when you asked that is my dad would get paid in cash because talking about the 80s, right? So he would come home like with cash. And my mum's trying to like work around school hours and then like have dinner on the table, is that like they really worked for the family. So it wasn't like, work is an enjoyable thing or work is something that gets to, they weren't like, this is my dream job. It was very much, you do this, you go to work, you provide for your family. That's the important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. And for you to be ambitious outside of that is, your own kind of confidence of what you think you can handle and what you want. So as you went through school, how did you get to that next level, not really knowing how you would get there?
I always just really concentrated on the things that I loved.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably could have done a bit better at making effort at the things I didn't love, like math, for instance.
Yeah.
But I had a natural ability that I could squeak through. So even the subjects I didn't try too hard, I passed. It was like the bare minimum, but I passed. But the things that I loved, I just poured myself into. So English and drama and music. And I think I just pretty delusional as a kid. I was a great manifester because I was pretty delusional. So I would be like, well, I like English and I like drama, so I'll just go and be like a journalist for theater or something. Like, and it didn't cross my mind that wouldn't be possible. I was just like, well, of course, I'll go and do something like that. So I was always daydreaming, having ideas. Like I said, there's never like one thing, but I knew what I loved to do. And I found that when I really focused on those things, I did really, really well at them and I enjoyed them.
So where did you end up after school?
Oh, so I ended up going to college, which isn't like what you would call college, like university. So it wasn't degree level. But I studied English and media and communication and psychology because those things interested me. And so I didn't know where that was going. After 2 years, I applied to universities because that was the standard thing to do. And I applied to 6, I think, and I got accepted at 5. And then when it came to making the decision of where to go, I went, actually, don't feel like studying anymore. So I went and got a job as a flight attendant.
That's awesome. Why? How did that come to be?
Why? That came to be because I wanted to travel. And that was the thing. And I was kind of fatigued of learning. And I didn't, if I'd have had a specific job, like I really want to be a doctor or I really want to be a teacher and it needs this degree, I'd have probably felt really motivated to still go and do it. But I didn't. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I mean, I don't know if anyone does at 18, but I didn't anyway. But what I knew is that I wanted to travel and I knew I had no money. So the question I asked is, how can I travel and get paid for it? And then I reverse engineered it from there. I was like, oh, I know, I could be cabin crew. They travel and get paid for it. Literally, that was it. I think
way to go about it. Yeah.
I think it was one of the first times in my life that I wore makeup was to the interview because I was quite tomboyish, like skater girlish until that point. And then my big sister was like, yeah, no, like you need to look really neat. And like, there's a look, there's a vibe. We need to paint your nails. I was like, oh, okay.
So did you enjoy that job?
I did. I did that job for 5 years. I would say for the first two, I really loved it. For the first one, like I was just like, how is this my life? This is amazing. But obviously novelty of everything wears off. And when there are places you've never been, it's great. And when you've been to them 10 times, it's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But I realized that I didn't want to do it forever. And that hit me quite hard, probably at like when I was about 20. So I'd been doing it for about 2 years. I was like, this is great, but I'm so sick of packing and unpacking a suitcase, of being jet lagged. And this isn't like the forever thing. And I don't know what the forever thing is, but I had seen a lot of the girls there get stuck because and it's easy to keep staying and, 10 years later. And I was like, oh man, I have like no qualifications. I have no degree. I've got the longer I get stuck here, the harder it's going to be for me to do something different. So that was quite strong in my mind. So I again just started to get curious. I'm like, what else could I do?
And what did you come up with?
And I was talking to a girl one day. So we had a really big base. There were like hundreds and hundreds of flight attendants. So you'd fly with different people all the time. It wasn't like a small community. And there was a girl, and it was her last flight. And so we had a bit of a celebration for her in the galley. And I said, oh, what are you going to do? And she said, oh, I'm leaving to be an air traffic controller. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because obviously we went into the flight deck to deliver drinks and things. And sometimes we'd sit in there for takeoff landing. We'd listen. And I remember listening to the air traffic control radio and going, oh man, like that's gobbledygook. That's like, I could never understand what they're saying. And she said she was going to do it. I was like, it was like hugely expansive for me, because until that stage, I hadn't considered that I could do something like that. But she was like me. She was doing the same job. She was around the same age. And she was like, yeah, I applied. I got the job. So I'm going to go do the training course. And I was like, that sounds interesting. So I went home to my then partner, who was a pilot. And I said, oh, I think I'm going to apply to be an air traffic controller. And he went, oh, don't bother. I applied 3 times and I didn't get in, so you've got no chance.
Oh, geez.
So I went and applied and I got in first time. And then we broke up and I went to do the job.
So when you applied, because one thing I'm just thinking right now is this is so opposite from your creative side. Like, it's math. I would assume a lot of math. And it's what I've heard is one of the most stressful jobs there is. So did you have a reality of what you were getting into when you started it?
I did, because before you have to complete, or you used to have to complete 3 different interviews. So there was like spatial awareness tests, verbal reasoning, math, all that kind of good stuff. Then there was like a HR interview where they just ask really weird questions to see how your brain works. And then a technical interview, which they sent a pack all about aviation and things to learn so that they could test how well you could learn things, essentially. And before you did all 3 interviews, you had to go to visit an air traffic control unit, or you couldn't take part in the interviews. So I did. I went into the radar center in Manchester, where I lived at the time, and I expected it to be super high pressure. I thought everyone was going to be like, it's going to be like silent and everyone's staring at screens and it's like something you'd see in a film. And I went after a flight because I arranged it with this guy, and I was like, well, I'm already at the airport because I'm just landing off this flight that I've been working on. So can I just pop in? And he said, yeah. And I walked in, and every single controller turned around to look at me because I'm stood there in my flight attendant uniform. And I was like, shouldn't they be looking at the screens? And he was just like, no, it's fine. And they were like chatting and it was relaxed. I was like, all right, this is a little bit more chill than I thought. So yeah, I had an idea.
Yeah. So tell me about what that was like to work as an air traffic controller.
So to train as an air traffic controller was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Mhm.
It takes 3 years, and I obviously didn't go to college, as we've ascertained, but many people that I trained with that even had master's degrees said this is harder than college. This is harder than any study I've done before. And they take you from day one of you can know nothing. You know nothing about aviation, nothing about airplanes, and then there's the theory side of it. So I had to learn meteorology and air law and aerodynamics and aeronautical engineering and all of these different concepts. And then also to go on into the simulator, and they're like, okay, well, this is like a mock-up of how you would control. So we're going to teach you the skills. And each time you come in, we're going to make it a little busier and a little more complex and build up in that way. And then it ends with the last year or so of your training that you're actually training on live traffic. So you're training with a mentor on actual airspace. They have a button where they can override you at any time. So, if you make a mistake, they can instantly like correct it. But that's the only way, right? You can't just train someone in a simulator and then go, yeah, you're good. Like off you go on your own. So it's it was very challenging. There was a lot to learn. There were a lot of exams. There was a lot of feedback, which they're always telling you when you've done something wrong because you have to address that, right? You can't go around doing wrong things. So it can feel like a slog. It can feel like I'm just getting criticized day in, day out. I mean, it built my resilience like I don't know what. So I'm very grateful for it in that way.
So, yeah, before you move on, because I think I was already thinking down this path, because one of the things I see people struggle with in the business world is delegation, right? And that there's a process for delegation. What you just described is a process for delegation. Like you watch, you take a piece, they watch, then you do, right? Like that there are steps to it where so many times people get frustrated in business that they give something to somebody and they didn't get it. And you're like, well, why didn't you get it? I explained it. But like what you're saying is without me doing it, I can't even fully understand or comprehend. Even if I'm in training and I'm watching the videos and I'm doing all of these things, like I can't fully comprehend what they're saying unless I do, they watch, and they correct.
Absolutely. And that can feel super scary because obviously you're not confident at first because you're not doing the things. But like we always used to say, the knowledge of is a big, thick manual and you learn everything in it.
Right.
But just because you can learn that and regurgitate it in an exam is completely different to taking it and implementing it. And that is the only way, as you say, someone saying, hey, do it this way. And then you adjust and you give it a go. And that experiential learning was most of the training.
Well, and someone had to take the time to do that with you.
Yeah.
And that's what doesn't happen a lot, is like people making the space as a manager or leader to actually be able to be there to correct or shadow. So what was it about the feedback that was uncomfortable? I know you said it was negative, but was it the way they delivered the feedback, or was it something personally in you of how you were taking the feedback?
I think I was really lucky with the people that trained me. It was delivered in a really great way. And it was delivered in a way because they want you to qualify, right? It's a job where they need staff. So they're like, yeah, if you can do this, like we want to help you get through. So it was very positive in that way. I think it was the pressure of it that you knew there was a set number of hours that you're expected to qualify in. And if you go too far over those hours, then the question starts to be, can you actually do this? Like, are you just slow at picking some things up, or maybe you're not cut out for this? And at that time, I think it was about 60% of people didn't make the training. So there was this very real pressure of like, oh, I really like this and I want to do this as a job. So I think the more constructive feedback, shall we call it, that I got about needing to change things or do things differently or better, it built that pressure up in me of, okay, the clock's ticking and I need to get good at this, and I need to, my high achiever coming out then going like, I need to sort this out, because I understood that if I couldn't do that and I couldn't take what they were saying and produce something good, it could impact my career.
Well, and I think that's true anywhere. And this is the hard part about feedback, right? Like, if you care about someone and you want them to succeed, and I think that part you said of like, they delivered it well because they wanted you to qualify. I don't think people say that enough when they're giving feedback. Like, I'm giving you this feedback because we want you to succeed. We're not just giving you this feedback, right? Like, because we're trying to just tell you what you're doing wrong. Like, we're doing it to make you better. But how do you overcome that? Because you were also, you said, a trainer, to overcome the pressure that someone internally is feeling so that they can even take in the feedback so that they can qualify.
So the interesting thing was, as a trainer, sometimes you needed to give the feedback there and then, because either, it was a mistake that you're like, oh no, you need to correct that because that's not safe. We can't let that run. Or sometimes if you didn't give the feedback there and then, you just know that if you give it to them an hour later when you're on a break, they're not going to remember that situation, right? Because it's fast moving. But you have to balance that with not overwhelming someone that's trying to actually do the job at the same time. So again, I think that just comes down to, where is the person in their training? Like, and me saying, like, what capacity do they have right now? Do they have the capacity for me to point something out and say, oh, like that thing, maybe try doing it like this? Or, you can tell when you've been training people for a while, or are they at capacity and I'm literally going to just, ruin their whole session of training if I try and get them to learn this thing. Now, I can get them to learn it in an hour's time. We can talk about it, away from the radar.
So I think that's really good advice. And for someone with emotional intelligence, that might come naturally to be able to see, like, someone can't take it in. If I don't naturally have emotional intelligence, what would be the things that you saw that was like, this person can handle it right now, or this person, I've got to find another way to have this conversation at another time?
It was very much about tunnel vision. So when people are getting to capacity, and there's obviously, this stands for anyone in any pressure-driven environment or, in any kind of role. If I was talking to them, they might go, and be nodding, but it's not really going in. They wouldn't be, if I said to them, what did I just say? They wouldn't be able to repeat it back to me. So I think that's a really good way. Like, has that person got the capacity to actually take in what you're saying and process it? And could they explain back to you what you've just said? As soon as people start going, or a short nod and not really acknowledging it, I'm like, that they can't take this. This is wasted on them right now.
Yeah. I think those are good verbal cues for people to watch if it doesn't come naturally to you, so that you do create the time and space for the right feedback, especially if you do want someone to succeed, to just know when people are stressed.
Yes.
So once you got through that process, then what?
I had a really weird 6 months, because I had been training for 3 years and studying. I'd studied probably 6 days a week for the best part of 3 years to make sure I had all of the, because I wasn't going to, I had this feeling of like, I'm not going to fail from something that I could have done better. So, it wasn't like math. It was like English and drama. I was all in. I was doing the study. And then the day that I qualified, there were no more exams. So I had all the knowledge. I'd solidified the knowledge. I had 6 months where I really struggled to relax. I felt guilty for picking up a magazine. I struggled to switch off and actually enjoy my days off, because my days off until then had been an opportunity to study and make sure that I was up to speed for the next exam or the next test. that was really interesting, and is something that I know a lot of my clients struggle with. It was the guilt. I shouldn't relax. It's bad to relax. I should be doing something. And it took my nervous system, I would say, a good 6 months to actually go, I don't need to be doing anything. Like, this is my time off. I can read a magazine or go out without feeling like, oh, well, I should do like half an hour of study as well.
Well, and can it also be too that like when you're driving towards something, it's giving you like a purpose and a mission, and then you get it, and it's kind of like, oh, that's it? Like, I'm just it? I'm like there?
Absolutely. And the day that you qualify, you do a practical. So you work on the airspace that you're qualifying on, and 2 people watch you and make sure that you're good enough. And then you have an oral exam. So they ask a lot of questions to test your knowledge of things they didn't see. And I remember they looked at each other after that, and they just went, yeah, you've passed. Well done. And I hit the table. My head went on the table, and I didn't go like, yay. I went, it was like the relief almost of, which is really odd because I never thought I'd have that reaction. But yeah, like you say, you work to something, you let all that stress go, and then it's like, oh.
Yeah.
What now?
Yeah. What am I going to do with my life, my time, all of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then what happened with your career when doing it? So did you
So
enjoy it? Like once you
I
actually
did.
were doing?
I loved it. I loved it. There's I haven't controlled for just over 5 years now, and I still miss it. I still miss the actual controlling because it used my brain in a way that I don't think anything else does.
And why is that? Is it just different every day, or?
It's the same. It's always the same airspace. It's always the same procedures. There are only so many actions that you can take. There's only so many ways of separating aircraft. But it's a real big picture puzzle. So you're thinking about things that are just happening now, that are about to happen, and that are maybe happening in 15 minutes, and piecing it all together. And interestingly, about 2 years ago, I had someone on the podcast, and she did my Clifton strengths, which I'd never had done before. And my top one was strategic. And when she explained it, it was pretty much the way brains work in air traffic control. So I went, oh.
And what is that?
That makes so much sense. It's the big picture. It's pattern recognition. It's looking at the options, seeing what might happen, what might not happen, different ways of connecting the dots.
Yeah. Did you ever have anything happen that freaked you out in that role?
No, not freaked me out, because it becomes apparent quite quickly that aircraft do have issues. They have issues fairly regularly, and there are procedures for that. And 99.9% of times, nothing comes of it. So an aircraft might say, "Oh, we think we've got a problem," and then they go, "Oh no, it's fine. Yeah, we've sorted it out." So I think that I could have been more freaked out if I hadn't had the level of training to know what to expect, and to know that it's probably 99.99999% of the time nothing happens. And also there's something very humbling about sitting in front of a radar, and you can look at like the whole of the UK and a little bit of France as well. And you just see all of these aircraft, hundreds of aircraft, day in, day out, 24/7 for years and years and years. And you go, wow, that like there are so many people are flying all the time, like every day. And the actual percentage of things going wrong is like so slim that it's amazing, really. It's incredible.
Yeah. That's nice to have that sense of, I got this. Like, where there's a sense of calm, because I'll say this to my kids a lot too, or even to myself. But when they were young, they were in cross country, and before their meets, they would get nervous. I'm like, trust the training.
Yeah.
Like before the race, like don't worry about the race itself. You've trained for this moment. And there's so many things in life where it's like you're nervous about, you finally got to that experience, or like your exam, but it's like, trust the training. Like if I'm not going to let my head get out of control, because I've done the work to get to this spot.
And actually, a great story to illustrate that is the week before my certification, I asked if I could take 2 days. We used to work a 6-day cycle, and I asked if I could take the last 2 days off because I was just a little tired. I'd been trained. I just wanted to try to relax before it. And I remember my training manager said this to me, and it's such good advice. She said, "Yeah, that's fine." She said, "You're not relying on 2 days of training to pass. Like you've just trained for 3 years. Like, two days isn't going to be the difference between you passing and failing. Yeah, like go and have an extended set of days off and yeah, try and relax."
Yeah. Yeah. You have to trust all that time that you've put into it. Like,
Yeah,
can't
exactly.
cram it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why did you decide to transition out of this?
Many small reasons that all dotted together that were mainly health related. So I had a couple of slip discs in my neck about 10 years ago, had some physiotherapy, kind of got okay with it, would flare up every so often. And then about 7 years ago, I woke up one morning and couldn't move and essentially had trapped the nerve. I had all kinds of issues. I had a couple of surgeries with it. And the job itself is very demanding on the neck because I had about 6 or 7 different screens that I'm constantly moving my head, looking at. And I was just finding that I was just in pain so much. And then, a lot of pain medication I couldn't take because it's a licensed role. Then I found I was spending my days off, having physio or something just to get in enough shape to go back to work. And I think anyone that's experienced chronic pain for a long period of time just knows that I was like, something's got to give. And actually, I could transition out of this and potentially feel a lot better and have my health. And the day that I handed my resignation in, I cried my eyes out.
Yeah.
But even though I knew it was the right thing, but there was still that sense of, end of an era. And like I say, a lot of people, I think, find entrepreneurship because they leave jobs that they hate or toxic workplaces or just miserable. And that wasn't the case for me. But yeah, that's a good thing. I'll take going out being happy.
Yeah. So how did you make that pivot? Like, why did you decide to be an entrepreneur instead of going into another corporate job or finding something else in the airlines?
So what I actually found was I found a transition role, which was a freelance consulting role with another air traffic service provider that would give me, maybe a week each month of work, but the free time to be able to build up my coaching practice. By then I'd done a coaching certification. I'd really gotten interested in performance and mindset. So I was like, I think I want to build something with this. I'd obviously, built some money up before I left. But then I was like, I've got this job, that I can do a week or so every month or 6 weeks that will, just pay the mortgage and all of that. Except I started that job in February 2020 and it was in Switzerland. So I think I did 4 days and then they closed the borders and I had to fly home because of COVID. So, best laid plans. So at that point, I had no job and I'm stuck in my house. So I'm like, wow, I guess I'm going all in on this business stuff.
Yeah. So what did you decide to do?
So I knew already it was coaching, but I was building up. At that time, I joined a program that was about social media. So I started building up social media. I started my podcast. That's 5 years old now. And just really had to learn how to market, had to learn how to sell. I mean, these were skills that were just completely new to me. And just, again, followed the joy. What was I enjoying at that time? And it became apparent that I really enjoyed supporting other introverts. And that's where the brand got its name and the direction that I ended up taking, working with the quieter and more sensitive amongst us.
So you consider yourself an introvert?
Absolutely.
And why is that?
Huge introvert, because as much as I'm a sociable person and I love people, I need my time alone to recharge. That to me is I feel it. It's like a switch goes and I'm like, the battery has gone and now I need no one to talk to me. And I just need to be in my own energy to recover.
Yeah. So how do you work with introverts or what are you doing to help?
So I work with them on many things that come under the umbrella of performance. And I say that because so much as an introvert impacts how we can perform, obviously our confidence, the boundaries that we set for ourselves, how we recharge our energy, because a lot of introverts don't understand the importance of that time alone or don't understand how their energy impacts them. So if they're not using it wisely and they're, just taking on too many things, saying yes to too many things, they run out of steam so much faster than extroverts. Or if they're trying to use that extroverted standard of success, especially in the workplace where people are doing a lot of networking and, chatty and all of that, which a lot of introverts are like, oh, this is so hard. And so they're trying to work at a high level and keep up a facade that doesn't actually suit their social battery.
So you've been a person that has found confidence within yourself, being an introvert. But I know, I have a lot of accountants that listen to this podcast, so there's a high level of introversion. So one of the things that has come up about like being put on the spot to answer questions, like, is not necessarily like they want more time to think of an answer in a meeting and so forth. And then when they don't, they might feel like they didn't show up well. So how do you suggest for people to handle those things where they need a moment before they're not an instant answer person?
It's such a common thing, what you've described. It's so common. And someone once said, and I thought this was a great quote, but I can't remember who, so I'm sorry, I can't. I can't give them the dibs. Extroverts speak to think, but introverts need to think before they speak. So it's a different way of processing. So extroverts will brainstorm, they'll throw ideas out, they'll verbalize things, and they get to their good ideas in that way. Introverts go inwards and they need to think before they say something because we do process more deeply. And so if you're in doubt, over communicate. This is the advice I always give to clients because most people are either extroverts or they are holding everyone to extroverted standards of what they expect. So maybe they expect a quick answer. Over communicate that. Be like, do you know what? I want to sit with this because I'll give you a better answer. Can you come back to me at the end? Or can you just give me a heads up before the meeting? What are we going to be talking about? Because then I can make sure that I've given it some thought and I'll be able to give you my best ideas there and then. So really reframing it as this is how I operate and this is how I can do best in my role, or this is how I can give you what you want in the best way. Ivy Gustafsson in Impact 11, Ivy is one of the coaches. She's a huge introvert, even though she's like super bubbly like me. And her favorite thing she says is like, let me take this for a walk. So if a client asks her something, she doesn't want to answer on the spot because she knows that there'll be a better answer once she's processed it a little bit. So she's like, let me take this for a walk. And she knows that she'll come back with something better.
And I think what you're describing is mindfulness, right? Like it's getting present so that you can just be in the present moment, assess the situation that you're in, not evaluating it on the past or the future.
Yeah.
And it's something extroverts have to work on as well, because like you said, when we speak too fast, a lot of times later, we're like, shoot, I should have said this.
Yeah, because you've kind of like spoken it out as you're thinking it. It's not a fully baked idea. So then you get that regret of like, oh, why did I say that?
It's when your brain processes later, you're like, oh, that was a better idea. Or, like could have said that instead.
Yeah. And it's the same mechanism, right? But introverts have probably just kept it quiet before. So what they present with, people usually go, oh, that's really good. But they've been through the same process. They've just been through it silently.
Yeah. Which I think, people should look at as a superpower as well. That it's not always a bad thing to not process right away. And sometimes, the people that don't speak up as much, whenever they speak, you're like, oh, they have something good to say.
And I think from you touched on before, like leaders and taking time to support people and give feedback and see how people are doing, because we all want the best for, we all want everyone to succeed. That's a great way for managers and leaders to understand if it's going to take this person a little bit longer to formulate their idea. It's not that they're slow, or it's not that they're nervous to speak up. They just want to present the best thing that they can. And also, like on the flip side, like you say, don't judge the extroverts on the first thing they said, because they might come back and go, "Oh, actually, scrap that. I
Yeah,
think this is better." Yeah.
Yeah, they're just processing.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, so many great lessons in your stories. So thank you so much for sharing it. I like to just end with some rapid fire questions. So you get to pick a category. So,
Okay.
either family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Health.
And I'm putting an introvert on the spot. So,
Yes. Yeah. Unprepared.
so things or actions I don't have that I want with my health.
I want a more consistent exercise routine.
Yeah.
That is something that I do not have that I want.
Okay. And things or actions I do have that I want to keep as far as my health.
Okay. I am in a really good place with my nutrition at the
Oh,
moment, with my food. So that is feeling great. So I definitely want to keep that.
awesome. Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want.
I don't know how to put it into words. I almost got a vision of it. This like lethargy, this just like a complete like lack of energy, almost like just collapsing in front of the TV and not having any drive. I don't want that. I don't have
Yeah.
it. I don't want it.
Yeah, I like that. Things or actions that I do have that I don't want, that I want to get rid of.
Procrastination about making a consistent exercise routine.
Well, you did it with your nutrition, so
I did. This is true. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Small steps.
that's exactly it. So, is there anything that we didn't cover today, or you want to make sure to leave the audience with, or reiterate that we covered before we end our discussion today?
I think just to take it the layer underneath everything that we talked about, we had a fun conversation, and I'm sharing like the high level overview of the story. But there were many times during, school, college, air traffic control, all of it, where I doubted myself,
Mhm.
and I had beliefs that weren't necessarily helpful. And that's normal. So it's not like, I think it's easy to look at people sometimes and go, "Oh, well, it was easy for them." Like,
Right.
they just did it. I couldn't do that, but they were confident. Like, there were still those moments of doubt, and there was still, can I do this? And am I doing the right thing? But I never let that win the conversation. I
Hmm.
always just keep going and choose to think, oh, that, what an interesting thought. Let me just acknowledge that and then ignore it and carry on. But it doesn't mean that they're not there. I think it's not about the absence of doubts or negative thoughts. It's about recognizing that every single person has them, but you can still take action anyway. You get to ignore them.
And how did you learn to do that?
Practice. Lots and lots and lots of practice. And that action is the greatest confidence builder. So, a lot of people think, "Oh, we'll sit at home and when I'm confident, I'll do this thing." No, like go and start doing the thing, because that will build your confidence much faster. And the more confident you are, the easier it is to ignore.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It was great to have you, and thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now for my mindful moments with this interview with Emma. It was such a great interview, so many fascinating stories that she shared. And the first one really being about her growing up and moving from an elementary school that was similar to her background to transitioning into her school that had such a big age range of 11 to 18-year-olds that was immediately a different atmosphere socially, and how she navigated herself through that. And we talked a lot about it, of why she didn't get the peer pressure to do the bad things that she was seeing around her every day. And the reason was that she felt an internal confidence to not do it, and not wanting anything to happen to her or her future by doing any of those things, and just having that in her mind. So I think it's really important to always have that vision. And we talked about the importance of manifestation. And the fact that she did manifest that she wanted to be successful and do things later on in her life and was ambitious to do those things, I think it was important to get her through some of her hardest times of growing up. We also talked about how after she went to college, that she, instead of going to university in her country, what she did was decide, what is it that I want to do? And again, came back to visioning and manifestation. And she loved to travel. And that got her started as a flight attendant. She worked backwards into coming up with what is the job or career that I want based on what I would love to do or what would bring me joy. And really getting curious about what kind of work that would be. And she stayed in that curiosity until one of those flight attendants was leaving to become an air traffic controller. And that got her curiosity going again of what is that? How do you do that? Is that something that she would be interested in? And we talked about the process of becoming an air traffic controller and learning to be an air traffic controller, which is a very challenging, highly skilled job. And also, you have a lot of pressure on you to make sure that you have the right training so that you do no harm, right? So, we talked about the importance of making space to train and how important her training was and the feedback that she received during her training, and also how to receive that feedback in a way that she could internalize and action. And she learned a lot about what feedback she could take in, or if it was too much to take in, where she would have to give herself space and time to be able to evaluate it. So it is important to understand that. And especially when there's pressure in a role, I think all of us go into jobs to be successful, that we don't want to fail. And when we feel like we're failing, even if it's not the case, our mindset can get in our way. And we talked about how important her mindset was at the time to stay focused on this 3-year process to become an air traffic controller and all the tests that she had to take and learning that she had to take in order to become an air traffic controller, but also really understanding what worked for her so that when she became a trainer, that she understood how to have her message heard. And when people get to capacity and can't take any more information, that she's not able to train them further, like that she had to give them space. And I think that's really important. And we talked about the things that you can notice if you don't have that emotional intelligence. When you notice someone just repeating exactly what you said or can't repeat exactly what you said, they're not really internalizing it or comprehending or understanding it. They might just be saying yes so that they don't look like that they don't understand without really qualifying what it is. And so we talked about how important that is to really get that feedback from someone that you're training so that you know what you're imparting on them is how they're hearing you. We also talked about just making that space between when you pivot in a role. And we talked about a couple pivots when she pivot from passing and becoming an air traffic controller and how hard that was to even celebrate or get her life back together after she had worked 3 years, 6 days a week, 7 days a week sometimes. She was always studying and just never really relaxed, and getting yourself to do that. And I think we talk about that so much in the workplace with work-life balance, is where do you set your boundaries and make sure you're the most productive and not feel guilty to take time for yourself, because we show up better when we do make that time for ourselves. And then she had another transition when she realized that it was too hard for her to do this role with some chronic pain that she was having, and transitioned into having her own business. And again, looking within and understanding what would bring her joy. And that was to coach and be able to help others find their confidence. And one of the things that we talked about is her as an introvert, the things that helped her and what she coaches people now so that they can find their confidence, that they know they're not alone, and really up their performance level by setting boundaries to reset their energy for the things that they need. So I think there were so many lessons in this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and also found her career so fascinating. I want to thank all of you for listening to this podcast and supporting the work that we do at the B3 Method Institute. And just to remember that our energy is contagious. So making sure to be intentional about your energy so that you can show up in the way that you want for yourself and for others. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.